Shalom. Erev Tov. So I'm here with my family, and I'm so excited to have been asked to speak to you today about Juice Plus and real nutrition and real life. I've come a long ways, from Seattle to London, and then London to Tel Aviv. This is actually a short journey for me because I was born in India, and normally I keep going to India. And I consider myself a world citizen. After this regional, we'll be taking our family on a tour of your beautiful country, and although it would probably take an entire lifetime to see it all, I'm so happy for this opportunity to show my children this part of the world. This is my family with my husband, Doug. Well, they're sitting right in the front, and my two teenage daughters, Leela on the right and Nira on the left. Doug and I have raised them to not just be mindful of what they eat, but to also be mindful of other cultures and other countries. And that's because I was raised that way myself. My parents moved to the United States when I was 7 years old. And I grew up in a community, actually, that was primarily Jewish. So I grew up knowing many of the Hebrew traditions, as most of my friends were Jewish. My father, though he was an engineer by trade, he had many interests, and one of them was comparative religion and philosophy. And that had an influence on me. And I've observed over the years that there are many similarities between my culture from India and the Hebrew culture. For instance, both the Hindu Vedas and the Torah describe phases of life. Hindu philosophy breaks up life into 4 distinct phases: the student stage, the householder, the hermit meditation stage, and the wandering ascetic. While the Torah has the beginning, finding your name, God calls, wandering the wilderness, and revelatory worlds. As you can see, there are many similarities between the two because they both show respect to the challenges we face at each stage of life. That is, both of these scriptures approach life holistically. Now, in our modern world, I don't know if any of you are going to enter that wandering ascetic stage and leave your tribe and decide to go die in the wilderness so you're not a burden to your family. So perhaps some of these teachings need to be updated to be relevant to modern life as we evolve as a species. Now, I am not here to discuss theology or religion or spirituality with you. I'm here to discuss nutrition and biology. But my approach is holistic. I don't know if anyone will be rewriting the Torah or the Vedas anytime soon, but certainly science is rewriting biology. There is a new biology in town. And we are even refuting theories that have been put forward by Nobel laureates. So the science is changing, and therefore the medicine has to follow. The medicine has to change. In 2012, we saw our first big splash of articles explaining how the human body is actually a host body, and that there are microorganisms that live inside us that are orchestrating our lives more than we are. And this startling discovery is changing the entire landscape of biology. And that is because there are 10 times more microbial cells inside you than human cells. That is a thought that really needs to be pondered upon. So actually, you are really a host to a lot of bacteria. And medicine has to take this into account. Today's medicine is based on old biology because of the circumstances of the 19th century. Deadly diseases didn't really come about until the crowded living in the 19th century in urban centers, and people used to strive to live on higher floors so they could throw their garbage down, their trash, and you didn't want to live in front of the trash, so you wanted to be on higher floors. And that refuge pile was a wonderful place for deadly pathogenic bacteria and viruses to make a home. And so we became, with better sanitation, we were able to use antibiotics and immunizations and sanitation to really help overcome these challenges. But then we had this concept that we need to get rid of the body of germs. And what we didn't understand is that from that kind of thinking, we set the stage for a whole new set of diseases to arise. In contrast to the decline of infectious disease, autoimmune diseases are now becoming much more prevalent. Autoimmune diseases actually fall under a larger category of non-communicable diseases, or NCDs, that are not infectious. So this is a list of the NCDs that we know already are linked to the microbiome, and there's no reason to believe that there isn't any chronic condition that isn't linked to your microbiome. And here we see that high-income countries have the highest rate of non-communicable diseases, with the rest of the world catching up. So let's take a minute and understand that we are not so much human as we are superorganisms, and the world within us are populated by bacteria and other microorganisms. Although people interchange these words, the word microbiome, word microbiota actually refers to the collection of bacteria and other microorganisms that live inside you, and the word microbiome refers to the DNA sequence of all that bacteria. But they are used interchangeably quite a bit. I'm about to show you a pretty complicated slide with a lot of words, but a very important one to understand. It seems that early in life, especially the first 4 years, the stage is set for NCDs by our microbiome. Why is that? For the longest time, we thought our immune system was basically in your circulatory system and your lymphatic system, and it was confined to certain parts of the body. But now we are realizing that every organ, every tissue has immune cells in it. We didn't recognize them at first because they look different in every cell. But now we're realizing your immune system is everywhere in your body. And if everything goes well, the immune system gets trained early in those first 4 years of life to understand which microorganisms are helpful to us and which ones are harmful to us. But uncontrolled inflammation maintains the disease state, with the microbiome problems initiating and maintaining the unhealthy inflammation. Having one NCD increases the chances of developing one or more further NCDs, and the microbiome status affects the risk of NCDs and determines the effectiveness of drug therapies. So you might think that a certain drug will work for you, but not if you have the wrong microbiome. So it's really complicating biology for us, and we have to rethink everything as a result of this. There is also an increase in the journal articles in blue and the patents in red related to the microbiome, and that means that medicine is definitely changing and going towards this new direction. But do you have time for medicine to catch up to you? Or do you need to do something today to take personal responsibility for your health? And that's really why I'm here, to share with you how this information can absolutely change your life. Medicine has to change because at the cellular level, there's 10 times more bacteria cells inside you than human cells. And at the genetic level, perhaps less than 1% of the DNA is your DNA. The rest of it belongs to the microbiome. So there's some good news in that, and that is, you may have seen articles like this where we talk about your genetics may not have much to do with your disease state. If you have fear that Alzheimer's runs in your family, or heart disease runs in your family, or diabetes runs in your family, well, fear not. The only thing that runs in your family is modern lifestyle. So, what is the real story? What makes human beings so diverse? We started sequencing the human DNA, and we found out that our DNA is 99% the same as chimpanzees and bonobos. So basically monkeys have pretty much the same DNA as us, and that we only have as much DNA as an earthworm, maybe. So that's not a lot of genetic material, and it doesn't explain the wonderful diversity between human beings, because you inherit another parallel genome, the microbiome genome. And not only is this diversity there's diversity between your microbiome and my microbiome, but there's also diversity in the distribution of the different species of bacteria in the different parts of the body. Let me ask you some very important questions. Do you know if you were born through cesarean section? Do you know if you were breastfed or bottle fed? Did you take antibiotics, especially during the first 4 years of life? Have you eaten gluten in the form of wheat, rye, or barley? Have you not maybe played outdoors enough? Are you obsessed with a clean environment? You know those Purell hand cleaners, the hand cleaners that people use? Have you eaten a lot of sugary foods or artificial sweeteners? Have you eaten meat, fish, poultry, and cheese and dairy foods regularly? Anybody? Am I in the right room? Did that get translated okay? Okay, this is a big problem because these factors have altered your microbiome, and we need to do something about it. This is a picture of inflammatory bowel disease and what happens over time due to an overstimulated immune system being challenged by the changes in our microbiome. On the left is a cross-section of a healthy colon, and the genetic blueprint is in the middle left of the healthy colon, genetic blueprint of the microbiota in the colon, and on the right is an inflamed colon, and the genetic footprint you see has changed of the microbiota. Hippocrates said in 460 BC that all diseases begin in the gut, and it is true. When the immune system goes to war with your gut microbiome, disease processes take hold, and this is called dysbiosis. And this dysbiosis is perhaps the reason we are experiencing obesity. It's not perhaps, it's actually fact, excuse me. And what happens to our bacteria when we gain weight, and then that leads to diabetes? There are two major classes of bacteria, the firmicutes and the bacteroidetes. And this ratio, we know, changes when you have diabetes or you become obese. And other changes occur as well. So we are starting to understand what the microbiome does when the disease state takes over. You have a completely different population of bacteria. Okay. And obesity and dysbiosis has already been shown to link to pretty much every non-communicable chronic illness you can think of. So the objective is to do everything we can to slow down the weight gain and dysbiosis. However, studies show that somewhere between 50% and 80% of dieters will put weight back on. My experience is that it's more like 90% failure. Why is that? Well, maybe after this talk, you may want to have just a salad for dinner. But your bacteria have a different opinion about this. Experts call this your enteric brain, your gut brain. And that is because the microbiota has a voice, and it's much louder than yours. So the nervous system in the gut is more complex than your brain, The immune system does more work in your gut than anywhere else in the body, so your gut voice is 100 times louder. You don't stand a chance. If you just diet and don't do anything to change your microbiota, you're probably not going to have long-lasting results. So if this science is too much for you, let me make it very simple. Think of your gut as being a good ecosystem, like a plush green lawn. And then let's say you take antibiotics or any of the factors I described earlier. And then what happens is you kill everything, especially with antibiotics. You kill everything. And then what grows back, unless you pay attention, is weeds. And what your job is to bring things back to a healthy ecosystem. How can you do this? Well, there's different approaches. You can take some probiotics, but the problem is that there's over 30,000 species that could possibly live in your gut. Maybe unique to you is a couple of 1,000 or 2,000 different kinds of bacteria. You can't find that in a health food store. I'm not saying probiotics can't be helpful, but they are not the ultimate answer. They're just helpful. Then there's replacing bacteria. This is where things get a little weird for me. Okay, so what they found is you can take the feces of somebody who's obese, give it to sterile mice, and make them fat. Whereas you can take the feces of a normal, healthy person, and the mice will not get fat. So fecal transplants are one way that medicine is approaching helping people become healthier. I don't know if that's something that you're interested in, but it's definitely happening. Medicine is changing, and this is a therapy that is being used today. But one important takeaway from all of this, that we used to think of our large intestine as just a place to store waste. Now it's turning out to be a critical organ that is a breeding ground for the microbiota. In fact, on this planet, the most dense population of bacteria is right there in your gut. And so when we have surgeries, when we're cutting out pieces of your intestine, and that's a normal, common thing, think of it, if a doctor says to you, I just need to take out a little piece of your intestine, he might as well be saying, I'm just going to take a little piece of your brain out. I hope that's okay with you. You understand this? This is very, very important. And you don't have to take such drastic measures, actually. Okay, so the next approach, I mean, you could take, probiotics, you can replace your bacteria, but unless you feed the bacteria the right foods, it'll eventually change back. Understand? So you have to think about, who am I feeding? Who am I feeding? I have a talk that I do in the States called Who Should Eat? And people didn't understand this title at first, because you're thinking about who you're feeding every time you eat. You're not just feeding you, you're feeding them. So this is the best approach. So as I pored over all this new research, I pondered my own health journey. My birthplace could have been considered a third world country, especially when I was born. But my health was good. My body was in homeostasis because I didn't have any of those challenges I described earlier. Then when my parents moved to the States in '72, things were fine until I went to university. And I still remember seeing the all-you-can-eat buffets at Cornell, okay? And that's when things started to go downhill for me. By the time I was a graduate student at Stanford, I had horrible eating habits. I had horrible sleeping patterns. None of these things are helpful to your bacteria. And I was experiencing some serious health challenges. I was hovering over a microscope, and my neck injury from an earlier injury got worse and worse, and even the Nobel laureates that I was walking the halls with could not help me, okay? And I did not put, at that time we didn't have all this information. I didn't understand that the inflammation in my gut was keeping me from healing the inflammation in my neck, that it's all connected. So I started reading on my own, And in 1994, I read this article in Newsweek magazine, and the word phytochemicals was introduced to us. Phyto meaning plant chemicals. And it was right about then I decided to start juicing. So here I was juicing in the kitchen, and then somebody brings me this brochure on Juice Plus. We've come a long way. This was a very ugly brochure. Okay. Sorry, John, it was very ugly. But I was paying attention to the data. They were comparing how many glasses of juice, fresh juice, I would have to make from the same fruits and the vegetables in order to get the nutrition I wanted. And I'd have to drink several glasses. So I started to do the math. Well, I was a student. I didn't have that much money. So I realized this was much cheaper, much more easy for me to do. And there was no way I was juicing the variety. So my first thought was I should have thought of Juice Plus myself, because I was juicing in the kitchen, and in the lab I was using the same technology basically to dehydrate cells for experimentation. So I immediately understood the concept. Nobody had to explain the concept to me. I just thought this was so brilliant that I should have thought of it. Oh well. And the other thing that made a difference was that I could take it on an empty stomach. Because to this day, I cannot take isolated vitamins on an empty stomach. But here's what I did not expect it to do. I just took it because I thought it was a good idea. I did not expect it to heal my neck. And that's when I started to really pay attention. And I learned that there are enzymes, for instance, bromelain and papain, in pineapple and papaya that act as natural anti-inflammatories. I had given myself an ulcer from taking so much ibuprofen, which didn't heal me. But within 6 weeks, I realized that I hadn't taken any ibuprofen since I started Juice Plus, and I hadn't had a neck spasm. And to this day, I've never had to take ibuprofen again. That was 22 years ago. And today, of course, we have several clinical studies done in the USA and Austria showing that Juice Plus supports a healthy inflammatory response. So understand that systemic inflammation is synonymous with dysbiosis, or war with your bacteria. And I myself was gaining weight because of that dysbiosis before I got on Juice Plus, and immediately I lost 5 pounds. That I didn't understand, that was because I helped this dysbiosis get better. This was fortuitous for me because suddenly I started to make all kinds of other positive changes, and I started to think about more natural approaches to life. And that was very important because what came next is I got pregnant with my first, Leela. And I cannot think of a better way to start life than to start taking Juice Plus when you're pregnant. If you are thinking about getting pregnant, you must get on Juice Plus and complete. I used both products during both pregnancies, and I had 2 natural childbirths, no complications, and I owe it to Juice Plus because I know that things could have gone very differently for me. Today, dysbiosis is causing infertility. So many young women are having a hard time getting pregnant. And what I have noticed is I've been able to help a lot of women get pregnant with Juice Plus products and some lifestyle changes. Here's the story of Lindsay, who was a personal trainer, fitness professional. She thought she was very healthy, but she had these skin issues. When she started taking Juice Plus, her skin got better. What I didn't know about her is that she also had fertility issues, and she and her husband were looking at some very expensive options. Because she reduced the systemic inflammation and the dysbiosis, suddenly she became fertile. Then she started Juice Plus, and following the same guidelines, lost the weight very quickly, and today she's the proud mother of 2 healthy Juice Plus babies. Here's another recent story. Bailey and her husband were also having fertility issues, and after hearing these other women's success stories, they decided to give this program I had created a try with the Juice Plus products. And at first she was surprised because she lost some belly fat. She wasn't expecting to lose that. That was just an added bonus. And then she got pregnant, and today she has a beautiful little boy. Two of the questions I asked in the beginning, if you recall, is if you were born through C-section or breastfed or formula fed. Now, promise me that you will not go and blame your moms or yourself for what I'm about to tell you, okay? Because we didn't have all this information. In fact, for emergency cases, I'm glad we still have C-sections. There are emergencies. But what troubles me is that so many young women are choosing C-sections as an elective surgery. That is so important to reconsider. In this Swedish study, they found with 98 mothers, there was a big difference in the microbiota of the babies that were born through C-section versus vaginal birth, formula-fed versus vaginal birth and breastfed. As it turns out, babies who are born vaginally pick up this incredibly valuable microbiota from the mother's gut and vagina, whereas the ones that are born through C-section only get the bacteria from the skin. So that makes it much harder for that baby's immune system to get trained in those first 4 years of life. So there is a correlation now between C-sections and this rise in autoimmune diseases. There are many, many risk factors associated with pregnancy, and many of them are correlated to socioeconomic factors. But a few common factors are obesity and excessive maternal weight gain, which increases the chances of cesarean delivery, hyperinsulinemia in infancy, and metabolic syndrome in childhood. So the other interesting thing is, if you can reduce periodontal disease in the mouth, that also helps the chances of a successful pregnancy. That's very interesting because we have a study with Juice Plus showing that it helps with oral health. Who knew? We already knew that oral health was also connected to good heart health, but who knew that it also was linked to healthy pregnancy? So I want to share what a OBGYN by the name of Dr. Doug Odom did in the USA. This is what he saw in his practice. His observations are not included in our Juice Plus studies because it's a retroactive study, that is, it wasn't planned ahead of time. It just so happened that he gave his patients Juice Plus. Now, the standard of care in his clinic was to give everybody prenatals, but he gave his patients additionally Juice Plus. And these are the numbers that you see here. 0% preterm delivery, 0% preeclampsia, 1%, only 1% low birth weight, 0% admissions into neonatal intensive care unit, and 0% respiratory distress syndrome. That is really exciting news. Now, breast milk is the best food for babies. We all know that. What we're learning now is that breast milk is full of something called that's unique to human beings. They're human milk oligosaccharides. That's a big word. What is oligosaccharides? It's a chain of sugar molecules. And it turns out it feeds B. infantis for short, a bacteria that helps the baby create a proper gut lining. So baby milk is feeding. We used to think, okay, baby milk is for protein and fat for the baby, but the reality is it's sugars for the microbiota for the baby to build a proper gut. So again, that first 4 years of life starts right there in the very beginning, and it's essential to developing a proper immune system. There are other factors that help inoculate the infant with the right microbiome and train the immune system to coexist in peace with your microbiome. We should be more like birds and pre-masticate our food and give it to our children. We shouldn't give the kids definitely antibiotics, avoid it. Like if somebody says we have to give your child antibiotics, again, think of it like giving your baby brain surgery. Is it absolutely necessary? Bottle feeding, you won't get that nice sugar. They can't quite create that kind of breast milk that we have. And we should also let our children play in the dirt, pick their noses, pick their butts, get dirty. This is how they train their immune system, okay? Obesity is an epidemic hitting our children. It is perceived as a complex, chronic, and uncontrolled problem. and it's an alarming rise in the world. It's not that complicated. Remember, you have two brains? Well, and that the gut produces 75% of the neurotransmitters that are dictating your cravings and behavior. Well, the children have the same challenge. They also have two brains. So don't get mad at them if they don't eat their vegetables right away. In fact, you have to train them to eat their vegetables. What can really help is the Juice Plus Children's Health Study. We see that these children are craving more fruits and vegetables as their gut gets trained, because the microbiota now wants more fruits and vegetables, so their cravings are changing, and they're craving fewer soft drinks and diet sodas and things, any kind of sodas and diet drinks, any kind of drinks, excuse me. So we also know, I showed you, that the ratio of microbiota changes. In this clinical study, we showed that we could reduce insulin resistance and belly fat in adolescent boys. The only way you could get this kind of result is by changing the microbiota. Yes, we can absolutely reverse the microbiota. Otherwise, we would not see these kinds of clinical results that we've seen with Juice Plus. That is very clear to me. We have one study that will be completed in 2017, and I can't wait to see the results of that study. But for sure, because of the history of results we already do have, I'm pretty confident that we will get a positive outcome with that study. Now, as you get older, my 22 plus years indicates that Juice Plus continues to support our health as we get older. So my husband and I have recently experienced our children growing up in a fast-paced world, and they're, I hate to brag, but they're healthy, intelligent, active teenagers, and we ourselves are doing very well using all the Juice Plus products. Leela has a wide variety of interests, including classical piano, theater, and political world history. And Nira is a competitive ice skater. And having Juice Plus in their lives every day means that they are able to make the most of these formative years with very little to no downtime due to illness and injury. And our blood work has always impressed our naturopathic doctor. Nira has also had some amazing influences in her life, including these two wonderful Olympian swimmers. Ariana Cookers is from Seattle, Washington, and her friend Rebecca Soni. They're both world record holders. Rebecca has 6 Olympic medals, 3 gold, 3 silver. And Ariana believes that it is because of Juice Plus she actually made, in her second, she tried for the Olympics and didn't make it by a very small amount. And then her mother, who was a breast cancer survivor, told her to get on Juice Plus, and then she made the Olympic trials. So she credits Juice Plus for being able to go to the Olympics. And over the years, I've been able to work with a lot of amazing, amazing athletes, and I know it is a product that really helps athletes. We know that being an elite athlete means you overtrain by definition. Elite athletes have a higher level of the resting oxidative stress, and they show signs of free radical damage from exercise that are higher than inactive people. And we measure this with a protein carbonyls are a measure of oxidized proteins. So this was a study that we did with the in Graz, Austria, with the Australian Special Forces, Cobra unit, and they studied these men in training for 28 weeks. And what you see is the red is the placebo group, and the green is the Juice Plus group. BE is before exercise, IE is immediately after exercise, then there's 30 minutes after exercise, and 30 hours after exercise. And at the start of the study, both groups are the same. Now notice, fast forward 28 weeks later, and before exercise, the resting oxidative stress of the athletes is much higher, and certainly higher immediately after exercise. So there's a big difference. Meanwhile, the Juice Plus group did much, much better as far as being able to reduce oxidative stress. Let's see what happens as we get older. A lot of women face, for instance, loss of bone density. It's a big issue as we get older, and normally you're told to take calcium supplements or drink milk, none of which are good ideas. because the calcium, just because you take the calcium supplement doesn't mean it will end up in your bones, because your bones don't have blood vessels that are feeding it. The only way the bones take up calcium is from the push and pull of ligaments against the muscles and ligaments against the bone. That's what triggers. So exercise helps to build muscle, bone density. The other thing is the most of the diet that is high in processed foods or high in animal products, that's very acidic to the body. And so the body leaches out calcium bicarbonate from the bones as a way to neutralize that acidity. And so you lose the calcium because the bicarbonate is being used, you lose the calcium. So eating an acidic diet is bad for you. Now, a lot of people think that citrus fruits are acidic or tomatoes are acidic. That is not true. You have to measure a food's acidity by something called the renal acid load. That is after digestion, how hard do the kidneys have to work to bring the pH to the right level of, being slightly alkaline. And what happens is that if you eat more plants, fruits and vegetables, plants are the only things that don't give your body a renal acid load. And taking Juice Plus also helps with renal acid load, I have found. So my naturopath, so first of all, say no to calcium supplements and say no to dairy. When I turned 50 a couple of years ago, I decided to just test everything. And I did a DEXA scan just to see where I was at. And when I went there, the technician, he just went on and on, gave me a lecture about why I should take calcium supplements and do dairy. And I said, hang on, wait till you see my results, okay, and then we'll talk. Because the best source of calcium are leafy greens and other vegetables and Juice Plus. And I've been doing that a lot. So I got my results in the mail. And the same guy wrote in several places, wow, you have the bones of a 20-year-old or 25-year-old. And he wrote, wow, several times all over my results. So you see it works. Earlier I shared Bailey's story of going from having fertility issues to having a little boy. Well, this is the story of she also sharing Juice Plus with her 84-year-old grandma. And this is what she says. 8 months ago, I started my grandma on Juice Plus capsules and shakes. She's on prednisone and has to have done bone density scans as the prednisone has adverse effects. Her general practitioner was absolutely astonished when this year her density had not decreased but increased by 11%. He had never seen this before in his career, and definitely not a patient in their 80s. The power of plants. Here she is holding her new Juice Plus baby grandson. So yes, Juice Plus supports all stages of life. In fact, the research backs up these stories, as Juice Plus has been clinically tested in all phases of life, both in healthy people as well as people with health challenges, by institutions around the world. And some ask if the company funds the research. Well, pharmaceutical companies also fund their research. It is sort of the standard, but you have to understand, first of all, that there are some studies that were not funded by Juice Plus that were done independently, but most of them were funded by Juice Plus because the burden of proof is on the people making the product. Who else is going to test this really as thoroughly as the company has? Secondly, once you give a grant money and the product to the scientists, you can't control what they're going to find or publish. That is the scientific method. You can't control the peer review process. Will the study even get published? So every time they fund a study, you have to understand the company's actually taking a risk. What if the study is a negative study? But they're willing to put their reputation on the line and actually pay for the research. So you have to really understand the scientific process to understand how good it is that the company does put their money where their mouth is and do research to prove the results of Juice Plus. Okay, there are some 35 plus peer-reviewed research studies, and just to explain the numbers,
Of the 35 papers, 32 are clinical trials using Juice Plus and 3 are review articles. 23 of the studies are gold standard randomized double-blinded placebo-controlled studies. And all the clinical trials match what's called a standard of having good chemical practice, which ensures uniformity, consistency, reliability, reproducibility, etc. Okay? So stay tuned. What else can you feed your microbiome? I'll be back for part 2. Thank you so much.